The Detroit Lions offseason just took a sharp turn, and if you haven't looked closely at how things are shifting around this team, you might miss how significant it really is. When you line up the 2026 schedule and compare how it looked just a couple of months ago to how it looks right now, the entire outlook changes. Not because Detroit suddenly got worse, but because the rest of the league refused to stand still. Start with the home slate. Division opponents. We know that battle. That's always going to be tough. But then you add teams like New Orleans, Tampa Bay, and New England. A few months ago, you probably circled some of these games and felt extremely comfortable. Now, it's not quite the same conversation. The Jets, for example, are sitting there with a pile of first-round picks. That's not something you ignore. Tennessee might not look overwhelming, but the New York Giants suddenly aren't the automatic sweet we got them game anymore. They bring in John Harbaugh, and just like that, their quarterback situation doesn't feel as bleak. They've added structure, they've added credibility, they've added belief that matters in this league. Then look at the road schedule. Atlanta, Buffalo, Miami, Arizona, all with new coaches. A few months ago, people were calling some of these teams terrible. Arizona, Miami, Atlanta. The narrative was completely different. Now, there's fresh leadership across the board. That doesn't automatically make them elite, but it absolutely changes preparation and projection. Coaching resets can flip a locker room overnight, and that's why this schedule feels different. It's not overwhelmingly terrifying, but it's no longer filled with obvious breathers either. Still, when you zoom out, this isn't some impossible mountain. The Lions have been playing first-place schedules for 2 straight years. 2 years ago, they went 15-2 against a first-place schedule. That's not normal, that's not lucky, that's elite. Last season, the schedule was brutal again, layered on top of internal issues and defensive injuries that piled up week after week. And even with all of that, they finished 9-8. Think about how far this franchise has come that 9-8 feels disappointing. There were years not long ago when 2, 3, 4 wins were the norm. Now anything under double digits feels like a failure. That's growth. That's expectation. That's culture change. And yet, according to PFF, this is a team people are quietly forgetting about. That's wild considering Detroit earned a 93 overall PFF grade, 3rd best in the NFL. The offense ranked 6th, and that happened even after the midseason offensive coordinator demotion when Dan Campbell stepped in to call plays. Everyone knew that situation wasn't ideal, but they squeezed everything they could out of it. The defensive side, injuries crushed that unit to straight seasons. Reinforcements at corner and edge are just as important as better health. Address those areas, and this team can absolutely snap back into contender form quickly. Speaking of edge help, there's a name that keeps getting dismissed too easily: Jadeveon Clowney. People roll their eyes, say he's old, say he's expensive, but look at the production. Last season was the 4th highest graded year of his 12-year career. He's been on 8 teams in 9 years because you can't lock him up long term. He signs 1-year deals around $10 million, shows up, produces, and moves on. He's still a freak athlete on a 1-year window. That makes sense. It's not reckless, it's strategic. There are other veteran options floating around too. Aging guards that may not be long-term solutions, but can stabilize a line. And that brings us to what might be the most heated debate among Lions fans right now: the draft. At pick 17 in a 3-round mock, edge is the projection. But here's the thing. The offensive line talent in the 20s is sitting there. Caden Proctor out of Alabama keeps falling into that range. A massive tackle. Exactly the kind of presence you want to reinforce the trenches. There's a Penn State guard hanging around in the 20s. Fashanu's sitting there as well. These are players who were once mocked top 10, top 15. If they're available at 17 or just after, passing on that kind of value feels dangerous. Look at how the board is breaking in these mocks. Wide receivers flying off, corners going, edge rushers going. The Miami offensive lineman is one of the few trench players consistently near the top. If those offensive linemen fall, that's an opportunity. Detroit needs tackles. Detroit needs guards. Detroit needs protection and depth. Building inside out has been the identity. Second-round projections have Detroit taking corner D'Angelo Pons. There's buzz around him, star corner potential. But edge remains tempting. Edge rushers are hard to project. They all look the part: -6'6", 250-plus explosive. It's difficult to know who hits, but one will. The more swings you take, the better your odds. Corners, we've seen how volatile that position can be. Injuries, constant rotation, young players thrown into fire. Terry Arnold dealing with injuries. Ennis Rakestraw hasn't played. It's been a revolving door at times. A lockdown secondary would be incredible, no doubt. But without pressure off the edge coverage only holds so long. Then there's the third-round reality check, no pick. That trade comes back to sting when the board is still loaded and Detroit is sitting idle. It's fun until you remember you're not on the clock. And before we close this part, let's talk about Isaac Tesla. 6 catches, 5 touchdowns. 4 of them highlight reel grabs. Somehow looks pro-ready already. Hudsonville kid, Hillsdale College, transfers to Arkansas, played wing T quarterback in high school, and now he looks like an NFL receiver who belongs. It doesn't even make sense on paper, but when you see it, you see it. The flashes are real. The body control is real. The confidence is real. The question is simple. Will they get him the ball consistently? So when you step back and look at all of this, the shifting schedule, the respect metrics, the defensive reinforcements needed, the draft crossroads at 17, the veteran edge possibilities, and young weapons waiting for opportunity, this offseason feels like a pivot point, not a rebuild, not a reset, a recalibration. The Lions aren't forgotten. They're being doubted just enough to be dangerous again. The question is, if you're in that draft room at 17 and those offensive linemen are still sitting there, do you protect the future in the trenches, or do you gamble on edge and corner to fix the defense right now? What would you do? Because that decision at 17 is not just about one player. It's about identity. It's about whether this front office believes the fastest way back to true contention is doubling down on what built this rise in the first place, or pivoting aggressively to fix what held them back the last 2 seasons. If you look at how Detroit became a 15-2 football team against a first-place schedule, it started up front. It was physical dominance. It was controlling tempo. It was protecting the quarterback and opening lanes in critical moments. When the offensive line was healthy and cohesive, everything else flowed. The play action worked. The deep shots were there. The red zone efficiency improved. It all tied together. Now fast forward to the more recent struggles. Injuries hit. Depth was tested. Consistency slipped. When protection isn't clean, timing gets disrupted. When the run game isn't as punishing, defenses sit back differently. It's not dramatic, but it's enough in this league to swing close games. And we saw close games slip. That's why those names in the 20s matter so much. Caden Proctor sitting there would not just be a luxury, he would be insurance. He would be a statement that this team refuses to let the trenches erode. The Penn State guard being available would mean immediate competition inside. For Shanu, falling into range would feel like a gift. These aren't reaches. These are players once projected far higher. Value like that doesn't always appear when you're drafting at 17. But here's the other side. The defense has been fighting uphill. 2 straight seasons where help at corner and edge was a problem. You can't consistently win in January without disrupting quarterbacks. Coverage improves when pressure improves. And that's where the temptation for edge at 17 becomes real. You draft one, maybe he hits early, maybe he rotates, maybe he becomes the long-term answer opposite your current core. But it's projection, it's development, it's risk, and that's where someone like Jadeveon Clowney enters the conversation again. A 1-year, high-upside veteran bridge. If you sign him, suddenly you're not desperate at 17. You can let the board fall to you. You don't force edge. You don't reach for corner. You take the best lineman available and reinforce the foundation. That flexibility is powerful. Corner in round 2 with someone like D'Angelo Pons, that's another swing at stabilizing the secondary. But again, corners are volatile. They get targeted. They get injured. They need time. We've already seen what happens when young corners are thrown into heavy snaps too early. It's not about talent. It's about development curve. And while all of this draft talk is happening, don't forget the quiet internal storyline, Isaac Tesla, a player who barely had volume but made every touch count. When someone scores 5 touchdowns on 6 catches, that's not normal. When 4 of those catches look like highlightedly weak material, that's not fluky, that's instincts, that's body control, that's confidence in traffic. He already looks physically ready. The real question is role expansion. Will this offense carve out designed opportunities for him, or will he remain a situational weapon? The Lions' offensive grade being 6th in the league despite midseason play calling, disruption tells you something important. The system works. The core works. The structure works. That's without perfect circumstances. That's without ideal health. There's ceilings still untapped there. Defensively, a 93 overall team grade and 3rd best in the NFL overall rating isn't the profile of a team falling apart. It's the profile of a team that needs tweaks, not surgery, reinforcements, not overhaul. And let's circle back to the schedule for a second. Yes, new coaches across the road slate make things less predictable. Yes, the Giants under John Harbaugh feel different. Yes, teams like the Jets stacking first-round picks deserve attention. But uncertainty cuts both ways. New coaches mean new systems. New systems mean growing pains. Detroit, meanwhile, has stability, culture, continuity that matters when the calendar flips to meaningful games. The difference now, compared to years past, is expectation. 9-8 used to be celebrated. Now it's frustrating. That frustration is actually proof of progress. The standard has changed inside that building and outside it. So this offseason isn't about desperation. It's about precision. Do you double down on dominance in the trenches? Do you aggressively attack edge to finish what the defense couldn't? Do you trust internal growth at corner and swing for offensive line value? Do you bring in a veteran like Clowney to buy time and flexibility? Everything points back to that draft board at 17. That moment where the board falls, and you either stick to identity or chase immediate defensive upside. And this is where it gets even more layered, because what happens at 17 doesn't just affect one position group, it changes the entire strategy for the rest of the offseason. If Detroit goes offensive line early, that tells you they believe the quickest way back to controlling games is by overwhelming teams physically again. It means they trust that with better health alone, the defense can rebound enough to compete. It means they see protection, depth, and trench stability as the multiplier that unlocks everything else. That's a long view decision. That's betting on identity over reaction. But if they go edge at 17, that's urgency. That's a message that pressure is non-negotiable. That's saying we are done relying on coverage to hold up forever. That's injecting youth and explosiveness into a pass rush that, at times, just didn't close. It's a swing at immediate defensive juice. Now think about the ripple effect. If you draft an edge in round 1, corner likely becomes the focus in round 2. If you draft offensive line first, you can approach round 2 differently. Maybe you still target a corner like D'Angelo Pons if he's there. Maybe you double down on edge depth. Maybe you even pivot to another position entirely if the board breaks your way. And don't overlook how not having a third-round pick complicates everything. That missing selection adds pressure to hit on your first 2 picks. There's less margin for error. You don't have that mid-draft cushion to grab developmental upside. That means your early decisions have to carry more weight. At the same time, the veteran market is still part of the equation. A one-year move for someone like Jadeveon Clowney isn't about nostalgia or reputation. It's about calculated flexibility. You plug a short-term hole, protect yourself from forcing a draft pick, and maintain leverage. If he produces the way he has, quietly consistent, still explosive, that's value. And if it doesn't work, it's 1 year, low long-term risk. But here's something that shouldn't get lost in all this roster chess. The Lions aren't rebuilding. They're not scrambling. They're adjusting. The 93 overall team grade wasn't accidental. Being third best in the NFL, by that metric, doesn't happen to teams that are far away. The offense ranking 6th, despite mid-season disruption, shows resilience. That's infrastructure. And when you combine that with a schedule that, while changed, still isn't overwhelming, you see opportunity. Yes, new coaches on the road. Yes, restructured rosters. But Detroit has continuity. Continuity wins in September. It wins in October. It keeps you steady while other teams figure themselves out. Then there's internal development. Isaac Tesla is a perfect example. Production in limited touches, efficiency off the charts. The kind of player who forces coaches to rethink snap distribution if his role expands and he becomes a consistent red zone weapon or vertical threat. That's internal growth without spending a draft pick or signing a free agent. That's value creation from